You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday 31st of January 2014. London Mayor faces discrimination probe for anti-Christian sentiments. The 800,000 people living in Britain with little or no English. W. Dole, Bureaucrats tell UK, ministers told current handouts are manifestly inadequate. Don't stop serving pork for Muslims, Norway's agricultural minister. Sebastian Kurz under pressure to secure release of Austrian woman in Dubai. Council of Europe slams Spain for denying healthcare to illegal immigrants. Nick Griffin MEP from the belly of the beast. Australia, government planning failed refugee roundup. New Zealand may vote to take Union Jack off flag. African demographic explosion to affect Mediterranean, Istat says. Thought for the day, North-South divide. And finally, adopt a terrorist. UK news. London Mayor faces discrimination probe for anti-Christian sentiments. London Mayor Boris Johnson faces a legal investigation by the High Court as to whether he illegally ordered Christian ads supporting ex-gays to be removed from London buses whilst permitting advertisements by a gay lobby to run. Johnson has insisted he was not involved in the decision, but new email evidence suggests he gave the order himself. The actions, which coincided with his re-election bid in 2012, bring into question whether he acted solely for political gain. The Court of Appeal ruling follows new evidence detailing emailing exchanges that suggest Johnson may have acted for an improper purpose. World at 8. When are the establishment going to learn that Boris the Loris always acts for political gain? The 800,000 people living in Britain with little or no English. Analysis of census figures shows how most people living in Britain who do not have a good command of English do not have a job. Almost 800,000 people living in England and Wales have little or no English, with more than half not working, official figures show. A new analysis of findings from the 2011 census shows dramatic differences in the lifestyles and employment chances of migrants with a limited command of English compared with the general population. Migrants with little or no English are 50% more likely to be unemployed than native speakers and 3 times as likely to have no formal qualifications. The study also showed that those who do work are condemned to the lowest paid and most laborious jobs if they do not have a working command of the language. Significantly, the problem is most acute amongst women. Overall, 60% of those living in England and Wales but unable to speak the national tongue are female. World at 8, of course. They're at home buying food with benefit money and breeding more kids for us to educate up to the level of radical jihadism. Double your dole, Bureaucrats tell UK. Ministers told current handouts are manifestly inadequate. Eurocrats sparked fury last night by ordering the United Kingdom to double doled payments. The Council of Europe claimed the handouts given to Britain's jobless are manifestly inadequate. Ministers have been told that they are in violation of the European Social Charter, potentially opening the door for claimants to take the government to court to get more money. But ministers say obeying the diktat from the Council, which oversees the controversial European Court of Human Rights, would cost the UK billions of pounds and plunge efforts to reduce the deficit into chaos. World at 8. And it would be the foreign jobless who would sue us, their host country, not the EU idiots. European news. Don't stop serving pork for Muslims, Norway's agricultural minister. Norway's agricultural minister has called on the country's prisons, hospitals and nursery schools to serve more pork, claiming that the meat is being pulled off the menu to avoid offending the country's Muslim minority. We cannot stop serving pork because Muslims have moved to Norway, Sylvi Listhaug, a politician for the right-wing Progress Party, said this week. Those responsible for food in public institutions should put pork on the menu and then make sure that those who do not eat pork can get something else, she said. John Ole Juel Hansen, the managing director of the Norwegian Meat Industry Association, told NRK that public institutions in the country were now serving pork less often, although he could provide no statistics to back up the claim. Our members feel that many public institutions, nurseries and municipal catering departments often opt out of pork in the interests of a small minority, he said. Willie Hagen, who controls the catering for Oslo's prisons, admitted that pork is only on the menu on average once a fortnight. There are practical reasons why pork has been downgraded, he told NRK. World at 8? Oh yeah? Sebastian Kurz under pressure to secure release of Austrian woman in Dubai. Sebastian Kurz is facing his big test as Austria's new foreign minister as the pressure builds to secure the release of an Austrian woman who was arrested in Dubai after reporting her rape to police in Dubai. The 29-year-old Viennese was arrested by police for having illegal sex in December after she went to them to report she had been raped in an underground car park by a man from Yemen. The police also told her she could escape the charges if she agreed to marry the man she says attacked her. Over 100,000 people have now signed an online petition in support of her release, and campaign activists have called on Kurz, the youngest ever foreign minister, to make it happen. Sebastian Kurz must ensure that Dubai will return the young Austrian to her family and her friends, said Christopher Schott, campaign director of global campaigning organisation Avaz. Kurz has sent a high-level crisis team to Dubai and has done everything in his power to help the Austrian, according to the Foreign Ministry. A similar case last year caused an outcry when a Norwegian woman was sentenced to 16 months in prison after reporting her own rape. She was eventually pardoned and was allowed to return to Norway. However, co-founder of the initiative Liberal Muslims Austria, Ayma Al-Bayati, has warned that securing the release of the Austrian woman may be particularly difficult, as she is a Muslim, and therefore it's expected that the full force of local Islamic Sharia law will be used. World at 8, that is news. So she is an Austrian Muslim. So what's she doing back in Dubai? I thought all these Muslim places were unfit to live in for Muslims, which is why they emigrate to Europe. Am I missing something here? Council of Europe slams Spain for denying healthcare to illegal immigrants. The Council of Europe, which oversees respect for human rights in 47 countries on the continent, on Wednesday expressed concern over regressive legislative developments concerning access to healthcare by foreigners illegally present in the country. The conclusion is part of a wide-reaching report by the European Committee on Social Rights that examines whether national laws conform to the European Social Charter. The 2013 conclusions, released on Wednesday, found that Spain was one of the several countries that had regressed on social rights compared with earlier periods. Other states where healthcare, social welfare and occupational safety had been curtailed included Austria, France, Finland, Belgium, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Denmark, Lithuania and Latvia. Spain scored negatively on 6 out of 17 points that the committee investigated, including the decision to deny free healthcare to foreigners living illegally in the country, a general rule introduced by the Popular Party government of Mariano Rajoy with certain exceptions: minors, pregnant women and anyone with an infectious disease. Belly of the Beast. I now hand you over to Nick Griffin MEP, who talks today about Daniel Cohn-Bendit, a German Green MEP, a paedophile fantasist of the 1970s, Salford and the UKIP.
It's been rather quiet in Parliament this week in Brussels. I did catch sight of Daniel Cohn-Bendit. He's a rather plump, elderly-looking figure these days. He was in the 1968 student revolution in France. He was very much a leading figure, known as Danny the Red. These days, Danny is a Green. In fact, he's the leader of the pan-European Green political party, of which the British Green Party is a member. Something which the BBC never ask their spokesmen and spokeswomen about when they're on, and something which I think voters really should know about, is the fact that Daniel Cohn-Bendit, the leader of the Green group of MEPs in Parliament, and therefore the leader of the British Greens as well, has a most horrific record of having written about his paedophile adventures and fantasies with young children. That's right. He was there justifying paedophile relationships between young male teachers and very, very young children years ago in a book. He's been pulled up on it in France and Germany a number of times, but in Britain, no one is told anything about it. Of course, they should be, not least because this isn't just a personal, twisted quirk of Cohn-Bendit's. The Greens, particularly in Germany, but also in Britain, for years were amongst the leftists campaigning for lower and lower ages of sexual consent. So in Britain, various MPs, of course, voted to lower the age of homosexual consent from 21 down to 18 and then 16. So that when they're buggering 17-year-old rent boys, something that would have been a crime a few years ago is no longer a crime because they declared it not a crime. Very convenient, isn't it? Do tell people about that and the fact that the Greens have done nothing to distance themselves from a self-confessed paedophile. I think that's truly sick. Certainly, if people on the streets of Wythenshawe and Sale knew that, then the Greens would be looking to get an even worse vote in the forthcoming by-election that's coming up there than they're going to in any case. I was on the streets there last weekend, and I can tell you that we're getting a really good response. With me personally, people were coming up wanting their photograph taken and all the rest of it, but the party as a whole, we're getting a tremendous reception for our message. Obviously, UKIP are the favourites to create some kind of a shock, but, well, we're going to see what effect our campaign's going to have, because we're putting in a textbook campaign. It really is the best that we've ever done in a parliamentary by-election. It's going to be very interesting to see how it pans out. If you're in a position to help, whether this coming weekend or next weekend, we really do need extra people on the streets in Salford. It really is important. It's one thing to do a cracking job in terms of leaflet deliveries through the post and such like, but the thing that really makes the difference is real live people on the ground talking to other real live people. And if it happens to be raining, as it often does in Manchester, so much the better, because the fact that we're out in all weathers when everyone else hides in their offices marks us out as something different, and that's where we've got to be. So please get in touch with your regional organiser, with Gary Tumulty, with our head office, wherever you need to. Get in touch and come up and help. And if you can't come up and help, then please, when the inevitable letter asking for your help with money comes through, please do give what you can afford to help in the Wythenshawe and Sale by-election. A good result there is going to set us up tremendously well for the European elections. If, on the other hand, we don't get a good result, if at the end of it UKIP's media push and promotion is so strong that there's nothing we can do about it, well, it's still going to be very, very important to us to see the result, because it will enable us to tailor what we do in the European elections much, much more effectively. Do we concentrate on winning back that northwest seat, or do we do, in fact, more in other regions, knowing we're not going to win there necessarily, but simply to work on rebuilding and building the party organisationally? That rebuilding in either case is very, very important, but of course if we win in the May European elections, it'll be so much easier. That's really the key to it. But win or lose, that rebuilding will go ahead, and it's absolutely vital for this reason. At some stage in the next 24 or 36 months, UKIP is probably going to cease to exist. It's been created by the BBC and by the mass media as an enormous phony safety valve party with enormous public support, but it's very soft public support, and it won't, of course, be there. It can't be there when Mr Cameron does the deal with the Tories, which he wants to do, and the Tories at some point will have to do, because otherwise, the way that the BBC is promoting UKIP, it's going to lose the Tories the next election by splitting their vote. So they'll have to do a deal. If they don't do a deal and they lose that election, then the consequences of that will be that Cameron will go, and whoever the new leader is, the first thing they'll do is do the deal with Farage that Farage craves. UKIP will cease to exist within a few years, and then all that public interest, all that phony excitement that's been built up will be sloshing around with no home, and we're going to be the ones there, having always been here, the steady ones, the reliable ones, the honest ones. We're going to be there to pick up the pieces. Moving on, the other thing I'd like to draw your attention to this week is a most outrageous example of the big lie technique used by the Daily Mail and the BBC last weekend. You may well have seen that Jobbik, that's the Hungarian nationalist movement, his subtitle is The Movement for a Better Hungary, and of course they're close partners and allies of the British National Party and myself in the alliance of European national movements. And their leader, Gabor Vonar, came to London last weekend, not to meet us, we don't need to, we meet in Parliament. He came to London to meet up with some of the hundreds of thousands of Hungarians who are living in virtually in economic exile in Britain and working very hard. And of course, Jobbik don't want them in Britain. Frankly, we don't, not in large numbers. We need our jobs for our own people. And I've told Jobbik that very clearly, and they agree absolutely, because they want their young people, they want their educated people back in Hungary, working with them to build a better Hungary. They merely say they're in Britain at present because the existing government there has made such a mess of the economy that they feel they've had to go. But Jobbik want those people back. And their leader came to London to meet with some of them to seek to engage them in the European elections to get them to vote by post for Jobbik. All well and good. Of course, the left, and in particular the Zionist Board of Deputies of British Jews, went berserk about this. They had a big campaign to pressure the government and the Home Secretary to ban Gabor Vona from entering Britain, which failed. So he came in, they met up with not really a huge, but 100-strong demonstration by the thugs of the UAF. Didn't give them any problems. They went ahead and held their meeting with their people in Hyde Park. Quite a neat move, that. But in the Daily Mail and the BBC report of the event and the demonstration by the far left, they both reproduced a picture of half a dozen very Orthodox Jews, basically rabbis, standing, and they said that this was members of the Jewish community demonstrating against Jobbik. It appeared absolutely cut and dried, until it emerged that the picture that they showed wasn't quite the real picture. Because what they showed their readers and their viewers was a picture of a group of rather damp rabbis standing holding a banner, but the banner was cut off, so you could just see the top line, which looks like the word authentic, and you can't see anything else. And these people were presented as being anti-Jobbik, anti-nationalist protesters out with the far left. What it transpires is that these people are actually from a group called Neturei Karta, which is a very large body of ultra-Orthodox religious Jews who are vehemently opposed not just to Zionism, but actually to the state existence of the State of Israel, because they believe it's a blasphemy, because only God, at the end of times, can restore Israel to the Jewish people. So there they are standing with a banner which says, authentic Jewry is against Zionist aggression. They weren't there protesting against Jobbik, they weren't there protesting against the BNP or nationalism, they were protesting against Zionism and Zionist aggression. And when you follow the website link which is on there, it's, if you're interested, www.nkusa.org. When you follow that, you find that they actually very much agree with us in our criticism of Zionism and, for instance, ways in which Zionist big businessmen and media moguls buy or bribe the support of politicians, whether in America or in Britain, to get us to go and fight their Zionist wars for them. And this quite remarkable but very large group of Orthodox Jews have got no time for that whatsoever. And they were absolutely appalled, you can see it on their Facebook site, they were appalled at the deceit of the Daily Mail and the BBC in presenting their anti-Zionist demonstration as an anti-nationalist demonstration. We duly complained, as indeed did a spokesman from Neturei Karta. As a result, the BBC promptly shoved the offending photo down the memory hole, and as yet haven't corrected it. With the Daily Mail, we've given them the due time to correct it, and if and when they don't, then we'll be taking it to the Press Complaints Commission. We will have a go at this. But the most important thing to do with it isn't to try and go to the Press Complaints Commission, because it's a toothless, self-regulatory body which won't actually do anything. The important thing is for ordinary people like you, to get hold of these two pictures, to pick up the story from our website and to post them with a short explanation everywhere you can in social media, because this is a classic example of the controlled media using one of the biggest of big lies, and the more people who see that, who see with their own eyes just how deceitful these people are, the more people who know that, the quicker the remaining grip of the mass media, the controlled media, on the mentality of the British people will break. That grip is breaking, and our very significant hold in the internet is a very important part of that. We need to build on that hold. To do that, I need you to join up as an online activist, or if you are an online activist already, to get out there and to work really hard over the next few weeks, doing what we normally do online, but also pushing this point. The media lie. The media lie. The media lie. Get across to the British people that they treat them like mushrooms. They keep them in the dark and feed them like bullshit. That message is getting out, and that message is going to mean the future belongs to us.
Thank you, Nick. As usual, highly informative and provocative weekend thinking. Have a good holiday. World news. Australia. Government planning failed refugee roundup. The Abbott government is fast-tracking the removal of asylum seekers who arrived by boat and have had their refugee claims rejected by authorities. The Asylum Seeker Resource Centre claims it has been told of secret plans for a mass roundup of asylum seekers in the community for detention and possible deportation. It also claims asylum seekers who have had their refugee applications rejected by the Immigration Department and Refugee Review Tribunal will be offered 6 weeks bridging visas and encouraged to make arrangements to leave the country. If they do not leave voluntarily, they would be detained and face potential deportation. New Zealand may vote to take Union Jack or flag. John Key, the New Zealand Prime Minister, has raised the prospect of a referendum to change the country's national flag, which would include abolishing the Union Jack from its design. Taking up a debate that has simmered for years, Mr Key admitted that he would like to see a very different national ensign, favouring instead a symbol drawn from New Zealand's native flora. My own personal view is that the silver fern is the right way to go, Mr Key said. African demographic explosion to affect Med, Istat says. Africa's population is a democratic bomb waiting to explode, says Italy's National Statistic Bureau Istat President Antonio Golini. It will grow from 1 billion people today to 2.4 billion people by 2055 and 700 to 800 million more jobs will be needed worldwide, he told participants at the presentation of an IDOS Research Centre report titled The Moroccan Community in Italy, a Bridge over the Mediterranean. We must have a long-term outlook on the fact that migratory pressure from sub-Saharan Africa will only become greater and stronger. Thought for the day: North-South divide. What I find strange and unpublicised is the fact that since our world began and humanity spread, the difference between the north and southern hemispheres of our world and the great cultural divide. Now you thought I'd be talking about the UK north-south divide, but afraid not. My concerns go back further than just a few centuries, when the north of England, as it was then, contained all the great estates and castles, and the south contained the fishing villages and the smugglers. Well, apart from London, that is. But looking at the condition of my poor London now, nothing much has changed. However, looking at the world globe, I find it strange that most of the culture, music and arts have developed in the northern hemisphere, not in the lovely warm climes of the southern hemisphere. Now I hear you echo, how about Christianity in the Middle East? Well, Christianity arose from Jesus, son of the house of David, and Judaism, and also, strangely enough, from the shores of the Mediterranean Sea, as did the Greek and Roman empires. Also I hear the cries the Chinese and Japanese had civilizations where we were leaping around trees covered in woad, and a correction is needed here. The Celts were covered in woad and had to be pretty civilised to get the woad and painted on, so less of the swinging in trees brigade. I am part Celt and very proud of it as well, blue being my colour. But of course if you look at China and Japan, they're mainly in the northern hemispheres in our globe, so I'm not talking about them. However, they also both remained closed countries until fairly late in the last 3 centuries, so their cultures did not travel. The old Ottoman culture and religion did travel because as soon as they could, they travelled and conquered parts of Europe, coming perilously close to France in the south and the gates of Austria on the eastern front. Nothing changes much there either. But note, very few of these Ottomans went due south to any extent, thus not to South or Mid-Africa, Australia or Southern America. No, these countries, probably due to the inopportune seas and lack of proper sea-going ships, remained fairly self-sufficient for thousands of years. Well, until the Spanish, English, Dutch and French decided they should start to explore. But my point is that these countries were left alone, not invaded and not conquered, and yet did they do anything that changed their cultures or the world during those thousands of years? No is the answer, they didn't. Even the southernmost parts of India remained aboriginal and closed for centuries, even after the parts that Alexander conquered. And did they invent anything or compose anything that we use now? If so, I've missed out. We all use something the Romans, Greeks, Ottomans and more brought to our shores in the early times, even if we have invented and introduced much more into civilization than those countries in the southern hemisphere. Even the gunpowder and noodles that were adopted by us Westerners from the Chinese. What has come out of the southern part of Africa that the white man didn't put in? A few Benin bronzes, which are frankly awful, bead jewellery and a propensity for corruption and death and plain ignorance. Whilst northern parts of Africa, even with the Islamic influence, don't do much more either apart from a few brass trays and silks, which originally came from the Silk Road path over the top of India to China. Australia had its aboriginals with their way of life, which bordered on the Neanderthal, with their dream times and walkabouts. But did they invent the car? No, they didn't. They kept on walking and hunting with spears. South America had the Incas and other Amerindian tribes who had lived very nicely, thank you, with their human sacrifices until the Spanish arrived with their guns and horses and brand new religion to impart to all and sundry, and in doing so destroyed the only civilised people that existed in that country. What lives there now, apart from ex-Nazis, is a mishmash of colours and cultures that gives vent to the great divide between poor and rich, and you name. Progress. So we in the northern climes, whilst enjoying foul weather still up to this century, did not have the problem of accommodating members of other races in any great number. And whilst not doing so, we produced the great composers, musicians, artists, architects, doctors, scientists, authors, playwrights, theatres, statesmen and inventors the world has ever seen, and certainly will not see again. Most, if not all, these pre-modern greats lived and worked in their own countries. So my point being, why do the powers that be say that having vast amounts of people from other climes and tribes is good for us, when clearly, going on the events of the past, it is not good for anyone, let alone the host countries? When even people from these old, previously uncharted countries cannot and didn't bring themselves out of the Dark Ages, why should they do so when they emigrate to the Northern Hemisphere? There's no need to, as they just take advantage of the years of inventions that we in the North provide for them. So vast immigration is not good for any country when that migration consists of peoples totally alien to the Northern Hemisphere, even by virtue of passage through to the north. The Roman Empire suffered and collapsed when the Goths and Visigoths came into that land to fight as mercenaries and farm for their people, and has never really recovered its old glory. It was a case of the civilised meeting the uncivilised, and what was the result? Disaster for many, many years. Many, if not all peoples, have their own version of civilisation, and that's good, as long as it isn't applied to other civilisations or peoples who frankly don't want it or don't need it. This is the message of the Great North-South Divide on a world basis. Next Monday I'll be talking about Arabia in all its glory, but the message is not all milk and honey. And finally, adopt a terrorist. This is a message to all the liberals, the human rights brigades, the pro-Islamists and Sharia law would-bes. The Canadians know how to handle complaints, and here is an example. A Canadian female Liberal wrote a lot of letters to the Canadian government, complaining about the treatment of captive insurgents, terrorists, being held in Afghanistan National Correctional System facilities. She demanded a response to her letter. She received back the following reply from National Defence Headquarters, MGen George J. Parks Building, 101 blah, 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 Ottawa, Canada. Dear concerned citizen, thank you for your recent letter expressing your profound concern of treatment for the Taliban and Al-Qaeda terrorists captured by the Canadian forces, who were subsequently transferred to the Afghanistan government and are currently being held by Afghan officials in Afghanistan National Correctional System facilities. Our administration takes these matters seriously, and your opinions were heard loud and clear here in Ottawa. You'll be pleased to learn, thanks to the concerns of citizens like yourself, we are creating a new department here at the Department of National Defence to be called Liberals Accept Responsibility for Killers Programme, or LARK for short. In accordance with the guidelines of this new programme, we have decided, on a trial basis, to divert several terrorists and place them in the homes of concerned citizens such as yourself, around the country, under those citizens' personal care. Your personal detainee has been selected and is scheduled for transportation under heavily armed guard to your residence in Toronto next Monday. Ali Mohammed Ahmed bin Mahmoud is your detainee and is to be cared for pursuant to the standards you personally demanded in your letter of complaint. You'll be pleased to know that we will conduct weekly inspections to ensure that your standards of care for Ahmed are commensurate with your recommendations. Although Ahmed is a sociopath and extremely violent, we hope that your sensitivity to what you described as his attitudinal problem will help him overcome these character flaws. Perhaps you are correct in describing these problems as mere cultural differences. We understand that you plan to offer counselling and homeschooling, however we strongly recommend that you hire some assistant caretakers. Please advise any Jewish friends, neighbours or relatives about your house guest, as he might get agitated or even violent. We are sure you can reason with him. He is also expert at making a wide variety of explosive devices from common household products, so you may wish to keep those items locked up, unless, in your opinion, this might offend him. Your adopted terrorist is extremely proficient in hand-to-hand combat and can extinguish human life with such simple items as a pencil or nail clippers. We advise you that you do not ask him to demonstrate these skills either in your home or wherever you choose to take him while helping him adjust to life in our country. Ahmed will not wish to interact with you or your daughters except sexually, since he views females as a form of property, thereby having no rights, including refusal of his sexual demands. This is a particularly sensitive subject for him. You also should know that he has shown violent tendencies around women who fail to comply with the dress code that he will recommend as more appropriate attire. I'm sure you will come to enjoy the anonymity offered by the burqa over time. Just remember that it is all part of respecting his culture and religious beliefs as described in your letter. You take good care of Ahmed and remember that we will try to have a counsellor available to help you over any difficulties you encounter while Ahmed is adjusting to Canadian culture. Thanks again for your concern. We truly appreciate it when folks like you keep us informed of the proper way to do our job and care for our fellow man. Good luck and God bless you. Cordially, Gordon O'Connor, Minister of National Defence. Just brilliant. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozar and I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy, safe and dry weekend.